Use this pie chart and get the most out of your jazz practice session. Most of us have about an hour to practice at least every day, right? So how do you organize that practice session and what do you practice? So I'm going to suggest doing this. First, practice these 4 things and do each one in 15-minute increments. So first thing you're going to do is play scale patterns. So every time you see a chord, you're going to have to know what scale goes with that chord. Now, this is basic chord theory and scale theory. Most of jazz players who have already accomplished players don't think about any of this stuff, they just play. But when we're learning, we want to be able to identify chords and what scale goes with a chord. So in order for you to be able to do that, you're going to have to do your homework outside of the gig or the rehearsal. So I recommended practicing these 4 types of scales: major scales, melodic minor scales, diminished scales, which are half step, whole step, and whole step, half step, and whole tone scales. Most of you are familiar with your major scales for sure, so start with that. And if you feel like some keys are worse than others, like for us trumpet players, it's usually B or D flat or F sharp, maybe E, A flat, more flats, more sharps, more difficulty. Start with those and start playing patterns, scale patterns, patterns in thirds, major thirds, play them in skip step patterns, play them as triads, diatonic triads, try arpeggios. I have all of these patterns in a free book on my website, all in the key of C. So if you want to transpose them, feel free. I also offer the same book in all 12 keys. The other thing you're going to want to do is we tend to, well, Lisa, I know I do, I tend to get off track. So let's say I'm scheduled to practice for 15 minutes on my scale patterns, and 25 minutes goes by, and all of a sudden I only have 35 minutes left and I have to get to these other 3 things. I'm actually going to set a timer and make sure I stay on track, stay on target, so that a week or 2 weeks don't go by and it's like, oh, I forgot to practice my scale patterns, or I forgot to practice my licks in all 12 keys, which gets me into our next thing we want to practice in the pie chart: licks and 2-5-1 licks, or your favorite lick, dominant 7 licks, major licks, whatever you might find in all 12 keys. So I have 2 books I'd like to recommend. The first is from the Jamey Aebersold series, Volume 3, the 2-5-1 progression. I have this book. There is an insert inside that has a bunch of 2-5-1 licks. They're all in one key, so you're going to have to transpose them on your own. But this is a great book. The text is great. It comes with a CD. Most people don't have CD players anymore. But I think they're kind of getting into the 21st century, and I think you can, maybe there's downloads. But if you haven't done so already, get the iReal Pro, and then you'll have a backing track on your phone to take with you wherever you go, and you'll always have it. The second book I want to recommend is Melodic Shapes for the Modern Improviser. It has 2-5-1 licks in it as well from named players. This book was written by some Bay Area tenor saxophone players, Jim Lynn and Alex Merzin. But it has 2-5-1 licks in it, long 2-5-1 licks, which last for 4 measures, and short 2-5 licks, which last for 2 measures. There are minor 2-5-1 licks, altered 5s. There are minor 2-5, I just said that. There are major 2-5-1 licks in it as well. 2 great resources if you're not sure where to start. I also have a number of 2-5-1 licks on my website that are available for free. The third thing you're going to practice is you're going to transcribe tunes. Now you can transcribe your favorite trumpet solos or piano solos or tenor sax solos. You're going to do those by ear if you can. If you're having a real issue identifying notes, it's okay to start out and read some transcriptions. I have some available on my website as well. But I would recommend not reading them, actually doing them by ear and using a transcribing software like Transcribe or AnyTune, and listen to them multiple times so that you can actually sing them memorize them, be able to sing them or scat sing them, and then be able to play them on your instrument. The last thing you're going to do in your jazz practice is memorize tunes. So I recommend memorizing chord changes. I also recommend doing that by ear if you can. If not, use a fake book. Not all the changes in the fake book are always correct, but it's a great place to start. You can get the real book. The 6th edition is pretty good. The melodies in there are just guides. They're mostly written in quarter notes, so you're going to have to jazz them up and listen to the original recordings. Try some different vocalists. If there are vocals and there are words to the jazz standards you're trying to learn, listen to Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald are really good places to start because they sing the melodies pretty true to the composer's written melodies. Lastly, I would highly recommend getting the Mark Levine Jazz Theory book. This book is a college course in and of itself, and it totally opened up and made me understand jazz theory a lot easier than if I had just meandered about on my own. He also states that if you practice your major scales, your melodic minor scales, your diminished scales, and your whole tone scales, you'll be able to negotiate probably 95% of every chord you see. So once again, set a timer so that you can stay on track and keep your jazz practice session as productive as possible, particularly if you're confined to 1 hour a day, so that weeks don't go by and you haven't transcribed, or you haven't practiced your scales in all 12 keys, or your licks in all 12 keys and haven't been real consistent with that. Be sure to go to my website, jefflewistrumpet.com. There's a lot of great free resources there. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I hope you got a little bit of something, a little something out of this in order to organize your jazz practice time. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.